So, many people may remember John Major as his spitting image character, being the bland and boring cardboard cutout that he was. But I'm not going to lie, the speech he basically recently gave about Brexit is probably one of the best speeches he has actually ever given. So, this is from... And not only that, I have to remember, this speech was so good, even the Daily Mail did a story about this. So, this is, I have made no false promises on Brexit, so I am free to tell you the truth, John Major. So, until now, every US president I have known has considered the UK's relevance to America to be enhanced by our membership of the European Union. Very soon, our current course will no longer be able to argue from within the EU for our Anglo-American benefits in free trade, open markets and strong defence. Our friends, the Americans, are hard-headed about power. It is a romantic folly to think otherwise. Be in no doubt, if the UK can no longer serve America's interest in Europe, she will look elsewhere for someone who can. So our value as an American ally will decline. No ifs, no buts. We will be less relevant. No one should be bedazzled by folksy tales of our special relationship. It is becoming less special by the year. And this is not only Trump. Obama warned about this as well. He's basically said, hey, if you leave, you'll be back of the queue. That's what he was talking about. So for centuries, our state scheme and plotting to prevent all Europe uniting against us, now we have chosen to turn our back on all of Europe. A long line of former statesmen will be turning in their graves. We are told our future aim is to be global Britain. That is certainly the right policy, but it is hardly new. In reality, but it has been the reality for 300 years. What is new is that much of the world will now perceive Britain to be a middle-sized, middle-ranking nation that is no longer supercharged by its alliances. Suddenly, the world will be a little chillier. If the art of negotiation is to obtain what you seek, then the intention must be give a little, and hopefully to gain a lot more. I cannot know how the government has conducted negotiations in private with the European Union. Very possibly they have met the tenets I have set out. But even if they have, and not all the signs are good, the belligerent noises on an off-and-on daily basis have built up ill will and made the Prime Minister's task even more difficult. We know the post-Brexit world will be very different from now. It cannot be otherwise, because no form of Brexit will remotely match up to the promises made by the Leave campaign in the referendum. They were vote-gathering fantasies, not serious politics. I have no constituency, no vote clouding my view of Brexit. I have no ambition driving my support for it. I have no party whips demanding loyalty before I concede. I have made no false promises about Brexit. Then I must pretend that I can still be honoured, even though that I must pretend can still be honoured, even though in my heart I know they cannot. I am free to say absolutely and precisely what I believe about Brexit, and that is this. I understand the motives of those who voted to leave the European Union. It can, as I well know, be very frustrating. Nevertheless, after weighing its frustrations and opportunities, there is no doubt in my mind that our decision is a colossal misjudgment that will diminish both the UK and the EU. It will damage our national and personal wealth, and it may seriously hamper our future security. It may even over time break up our United Kingdom. It will most likely limit the prospects of our young. And once this becomes clear, I believe those who promised what they will never be delivered will have much to answer for. They persuaded a divided population to vote to be weaker and poorer. That will never be forgiven nor forgotten. Our domestic focus is on the impact of leaving Europe. Our domestic focus is on the impact of leaving Europe will have on the UK. That is quite natural, but to the world at large, the bigger question is how the EU itself will be affected. The answer is badly. Without the UK to balance the EU changes, the free market majority may be at a risk. Protectionists will be encouraged and perhaps even empowered. The UK will no longer be a buffer between the Franco-German steamroller and smaller nations. Germany will become more isolated and friction will grow. So what? Committed Brexiteers will say. We won't be members, it's Europe's problem. But that ignores reality. How can it not be our problem too? Whether we are in or out, the EU is in our neighbourhood. It will be our predominant economic partner, and our well-being is inexorably linked to their own well-being. In the hot heat of the debate, it should not be forgotten that we ignore the EU and disdain it or stand aside from it at our own risk. None of the mainstream political parties is in a healthy condition. Both the Conservatives and the Labour face pressure from fringe opposition within their own membership. My fear is the extremists of the left and right will widen divisions and refuse to compromise, whereas the more moderate opinion will often seek common ground and the risk of intransigence. It's my way or no way. That means the mainstream parties will be dragged further right and further left. Our nation should not tolerate the unreasoning apathy of the extremes. To the EU, to the foreigners, or to the minority groups, such apathy is repellent and diminishes us as a nation. Softer, more reasonable voices should not be drowned out by the ridiculous din of the loudest. I freely confess to a taste of compromise. Politics is real life. It isn't warfare. It isn't a popularity contest. It's about people. It's about four nations who deserve more than an ideological tug of war. Respect and civility would do much to help lift politics out of the dog days in which it is now living. More compromise, less confrontation. And I get where he's coming from. But the main point really is to drag out two things from that talk. The first, he's absolutely right. This idea that we have a special relationship only comes from the fact of us being in the EU. Second, us leaving the EU does not really diminish the power of the European Union. And I know what he's talking about, because the whole idea of Europe itself, the UK was a big proponent of free trade, and I think he's very much mischaracterizing what also goes on in the EU, because there are a lot of other free trade people championing free trade, but you also have a lot of people who are championing sort of the left idea of sort of being protectionist, that we need to keep jobs in Europe, in the country, and sort of focus on that. And hence there has been a really big push in Europe to get a lot of workers' rights, to clamp on, regulations that, punish companies for, doing wrong things, exploiting workers, in that type of general thing. So I agree with a lot of the left in Europe that are that are pushing those agendas, and I think that it is right for us to stay in Europe and help to push that, and we can do that by getting Corbyn in power. Because a lot of what Corbyn is pushing works very well in a lot of the Nordic states, and bear in mind, a lot of what Corbyn is asking for and wanting to do is nowhere near to the extent of what they are in the the Nordic countries. Now, would I want us to go that way in the direction of the Nordic countries like Denmark, Norway and Sweden? Yes. Ideally, that would be great. And, us being in the European Union and being able to be part of something greater where as Europe, we can have a lot of say and a lot of punch, will be it. And the other thing is about us being, diminished. Certainly on like the European or like the world stage. Where is it? I can't find it. But yeah, you get the idea of us being diminished, because this idea of somehow we're going to become this global Britain, we were able to do that and trade with other countries very successfully, being in the European Union. Now we're out, we don't have as large a clout as we were in the European Union. You've got Japan basically saying, we'll go and invest somewhere else. You've had literally all the car companies saying, not only are we going to scale back production, but we are going to start moving factories and jobs over into Europe. That is not what a lot of people voted for. A lot of people, again, the Brexiteers, promised that this wouldn't happen, that these car companies wouldn't do such a thing. They'd said, oh, that would be ridiculous, because we're out of the European Union, they'll want to join us. Well, hold on a second. All these car companies have all unanimously said, no, we want to be in the European Union, we want to be in the single market. Brexiteers explicitly stated the exact opposite, that they didn't want to be in the single market, that this was somehow damaging to them. And it's not just the car companies saying this, there are all sorts of other companies that are saying, we'd rather be in somewhere in Europe in the single market than be in the UK that's no longer in the single market. So, and that's the former Prime Minister. I mean, you can either, love or hate John Major. I think that speech perfectly sums up where we are, particularly on Brexit, and the damage that it's going to do to the UK, that it will make us poorer and weaker. And that's not what the Brexiteers promised you.